Hello and welcome to European Brick. And today's video is delayed, sorry about that. I've been working on a more ambitious project for a while now, and I've also had real life stuff going on. That meant that this video couldn't have been made in time. However, it's actually quite fitting given current events, since this is a Mun mission that's been delayed. But yes, I decided why not do yet another mini Mun mission, but make it smaller this time, since I've done small Mun missions in the past, but I don't think one of this small scale. And you can see the launch vehicle launching right now, which it's not world record breaking or anything, it still looks pretty reasonable for a launch vehicle. But it's a major improvement of what I've done in the past, and you'll see the main reason why I was able to get so small later on. And you saw we had those two SRBs, which are now jettisoned. We now have that, we now have the Restock variant of the making history Titan II engine. Which, for some reason, doesn't have a waterfall plume, I believe, so yeah, it's a stock plume. Yeah, the launch is going fairly normal. And actually, I saw that there's something I did with the SRBs. I saw this on the Kerbal Space Program subreddit, where you can put some fuel tanks on top of SRBs that join into the core stage, so you can get some asparagus type staging as well as having SRBs. Thought it was cool, so I tried it, and I mean, I don't think I did really well, didn't really give much advantage, but still. Anyways, we're continuing on with our launch. You can see the launch escape tower just past us. And yeah, we just in the first stage. We're now running the second stage, which will get us all the way to lunar orbit. And that completes our orbit around Kerbin, almost. And there's some stuff on the stage. You can see there's some small solar panels scattered around it, as well as the ullage motors for it. Yeah, we don't have the best thrust-to-weight ratio, so it takes us a while to get our periapsis out of the atmosphere. But we do eventually get there. And now it's time to plot our trajectory to the Mun. And so, well, I'm still using the New Horizons plan pack, so yeah, we have to launch a transfer window for the Mun. You can see I'm just planting the maneuver there. Not sure why I was having so much trouble with this. Again, I went to a transfer window using the transfer window planner. But yeah, after some maneuver adjustments, I'll be able to get a fairly close encounter with the Mun. And yeah, there you see. Nice close periapsis. And now we begin our translunar injection. And I'm just checking to make sure that the lander you saw there, which more on that later, the fuel from it hasn't been drained yet, since that's what caused the mission to be delayed. The first attempt, that fuel tank started draining for some reason, and that doomed everything. But this time we avoided that. So now we leave Kerbin behind. And can do a quick mid-course correction. And also, actually, something I should say, I have a USI life support on this install. And so, yeah, the only habitation volume for our sole crew member is the Mercury capsule. And yes, it's not the Morclin command pod, I'm using the Mercury capsule from a Blue Dog Design Bureau, since it has a lower mass. But yeah, we're right at the limit of just how long the Kerbal can stay in that command pod before just going insane, which in USI life support is represented by them refusing to work. But yeah, we get down to, I believe, 1 day of habitation time left before the crew return back to Kerbin. So yeah, actually on some of the test runs, that timer ran out before we reached Kerbin's atmosphere. But that didn't happen this time, and that'll happen later anyways. But yeah, we then did this very janky crew transfer, since As you can see, the lander is really just a blown shell on top of a fuel tank. So yeah, no docking port, no crew tunnel or anything like that. We just detach the service module, push the decoupler out the way, and then board the seat on top of the lander. And yeah, now we need to land this. So we burn the transmitter injection stage to completion. And after that, we immediately detach, well, pretty soon after we detach the lander itself, and begin firing its engine. There you go. And yeah, for some reason this was surprisingly difficult to descend. We have a fairly low thrust weight ratio for a lander, and am I just like getting rusty at the game I've been playing continuously? Because just yeah, I don't know why the reason why it comes to this lander on the moon. But yeah, by following this trajectory, we're actually burning partially up to prevent our vertical velocity from getting too high. Now we can fairly safely descend. And note, the reason I have a docking port on the lander is so that I have a control point that's in line with the center of thrust. So we've come to a stop about 10 kilometers above sea level, which is actually only 2.5 kilometers above terrain. So we slowly make our way down. And there we go. Not the softest landing, but again, it's a launcher taped to a fuel tank. So our crew member can get out on EVA. Walk around weirdly for some reason, not sure why that is. The EVA pack, it wasn't enabled, but I was still moving, the Kerbal was still moving, like the pack was enabled. Not sure what that was about, but yeah, flag deployed. And then we wait. Actually, before we do that, we can walk around a bit and do some very minor science. Because I realized that, yeah, if you jump, you can actually get the EVA report for a space low around the moon. Yeah, after a while, the mothership is back over the landing site, so we can take off and begin our ascent back to rendezvous. And yeah, since we're not in a perfectly equatorial orbit, I had to mess around a bit with getting the right inclination. But pretty close, I believe, under 1 degree, just under 1 degree of inclination relative to the target, which we're able to correct later on with a maneuver. And just deploying maneuver to make sure we can get into orbit, and then executing that maneuver. Yeah, I actually spent 2 days waiting for the orbit, or the orbital line of the mothership to align with the lander. So yeah, probably should have gone for the equatorial orbit instead. Yeah, we now plot our plotting maneuver to get a close intersection. As you can see, a fairly close encounter there. And this time we're into that maneuver fairly quick. And yeah, skipping through the rendezvous process, we end up at the command and service module. I guess, well, it doesn't really have a service module, does it? It just has an engine attached to it. But yeah, I decided to get close anyways, even though, yeah, we don't have a docking port and can't rendezvous. Well, we can rendezvous, but we can't dock. And we just get close. And then the crew member can go on EVA and just cross the rest of the distance. And there we go. And after that, we plot we find the transfer window back to Kerbin, and time warp to it. However, I'm not sure why, but the transfer window planner was wrong. Because you'll see when we time warp, which I'll be checking the life support the entire time, since again we get pretty close to running out of habitation time. Well, you'll see that we end up not being at a transfer window. Because yeah, as you can see, I'm doing a maneuver and we're just not getting anywhere close to the Kerbin, even though it does align with what the transfer window planner says. Because we actually check the phase angles. Well, I thought it was about to, but I guess not. Okay, yeah, finally yeah, now I checked the phase angles and you can see the green line is where Kerbin is supposed to be, the blue line is where it is right now, which is not ideal. It means we have to wait a few more days. So once we time warp, we're now actually in a transfer window, and can now create a maneuver to get back to Kerbin. And since we're at a transfer window, this maneuver will work out pretty well, and I don't think we even need a mid-course correction. Yes, as you can see, already just off the maneuver, we get a very good encounter, and actually we get retrograde a bit, and you can see that, yeah, we get within Kerbin's atmosphere. And so now we begin our Mon escape burn, and once we're done with that, that's all the maneuvers completed. And we can now just coast through space. Yeah, we leave the Mun behind. The beautiful Kerbin rise there. And we leave the Mun sphere of influence. And yeah, you can see Kerbin there, which we now rapidly approach. And after doing some last minute resource transferring, we can jettison the engine and re-enter. And the flame should start any moment now. And speeding through re-entry. Once the plasma subsides, or whenever it does that, there we go. And once that occurs, we can deploy the parachute. Yeah, very cinematic view of the parachute deploying, actually. And then the spacecraft can smash down. So I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and goodbye.